he was given nubuwah, and he used to look back at Hilf al-Fudul, and he used to speak well of Hilf al-Fudul. He used to say, if anything like in Medina, he used to say, if anything like Hilf al-Fudul came out, then I would surely take part in it. And the essence of it was that there was a need in the community, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was part of this, even pre-Nabuwah. My message over here is that fostering is a need. It entails us as Muslims cooperating with local authorities to meet this need, and it is something that, in essence, is something that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is similar to how Hilf al-Fudul, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam would look back at it and think, this is such a good thing. If I could, if I was the Hilf al-Fudul came around now, I would have done it. When it comes to fostering, a lot of children at the moment, they come into local authority care. Normally, this would be subject to, they might have been abuse or neglect, or they may have been subject to another secondary form of trauma, such as, or risk, such as radicalization or violence, honor-based violence, or something of that nature. Basically, there's a Muslim family, things go a bit pear-shaped, and for some reason the child does not have a caring person. Either the carer themselves is a risk, or either they have a loss of carer. They may have been displaced, they may be unaccompanied minors. In that situation, the local authority will be duty-bound to step in and provide some kind of care, make sure that they make sure that this child is safe. In that situation, they need to find a foster carer, and a foster carer can only be someone who's gone through the relevant training or the relevant assessment process. That's what Foster Care Link does. In our, what we do is we would then provide you training and provide you assessment. We would look at if you've got space, we would make sure that you've got the right stability and the right care. A thing to look at in this situation is, where in Islam does this stand for us? In Islam, fostering has never been an alien concept. Fostering has always been an integral part of the Islamic culture and ethos. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself was an orphan child. He was looked after by his grandfather, his uncle, and as he grew up, he himself was a foster carer. He looked after a child under kafala, Hazrat Zayd bin Haritha radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And the concept itself of looking after someone as a child, it is very common. Even if we look back before we came to England, everyone will know someone somewhere where a child went through trauma and another family member looked after that child. So culturally and religiously, it's very intrinsic to our identity. A very interesting hadith, the one I mentioned in the beginning, was when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Ana wa kafilul yatimi fil jannati hakada." It's a riwayah of Muslim. It's a small hadith, which means Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that myself and the person who looks after an orphan in Jannah are like this. A very small hadith, one sentence, but it's a very heavy hadith. A hadith that if it fell on the ears of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, would have some heavy implications. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba radiallahu, even though they saw Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam with their own eyes, would always like to do things with him. They would, even when they did small things like training exercises or something, they would not want to be in the other team. They would always want to be in the same team as Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Example I've used before many times, which rings back to the kind of the remembrance that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum had for Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A classic example is when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, and Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu could not bear the sorrow of seeing Medina without Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He travelled away from Medina, And one time he saw a dream when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "It's been so long, how come you haven't come to meet me?" And that reminded him of Medina. And as soon as he woke up, he made preparations, he headed back to Medina. When he came to Medina, the grandchildren of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw Bilal radiallahu ta'ala and asked that, "Can you do adhan for us like the days of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?" And bear in mind, the adhan of the days of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had not been heard for quite some time. Bilal radiallahu ta'ala was heartbroken, but he felt, I cannot reject the offer of the grandchildren of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he stood up for adhan. When he stood up for adhan, the mere adhan of the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had such an impact that the Sahaba radiallahu anhu came crying out on the streets. The children, the women, the men, everyone, they had such a profound impact of just remembering that time when they were with Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when you put it into similar context to this, when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that "Ana wa kafilul yatimi fil jannati hakada," that myself and the person who looks after an orphan in Jannah, we are going to be like this, like these two fingers together. Imagine how much the Sahaba must have felt at that time, that I need to look after an orphan. I need to make sure that I am in a position where I look after an orphan. And it's for a hadith like this that give us hope that inshallah, if we follow similar actions, then inshallah we can be in a position where in akhirah we could be in the company of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'll go back to the PowerPoint, and hopefully we'll get some flow at the moment, inshallah. We spoke some of the concept of kafala. And we mentioned that, we mentioned that bit. We mentioned a bit about Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam's connection with fostering. The third point about orphan being a loss of carer. One of the things that you notice that when in UK, when we look after fostering children, they're not orphans in the sense that they do not have a mother or father, but they're orphans in the technical sense, whereby they find themselves in a position where they are vulnerable. They find themselves in a position where they do not have their parents to look after them. They are to be transferred to someone else who can then look after them. And we hope, inshaAllah ta'ala, that by being a foster carer for a child who was at their vulnerable point in life, that we fulfill that role as if they did not have a parent or as a carer. Sometimes the parent is there, but the parent is not able to look after the child. They themselves are not provided to protect, and you as a foster carer would step up with the training you have and with the skills you have to inshallah provide that care that the parent could have provided. Fostering itself is a sadaqah jariyah. There is a very interesting hadith which we may have read many times, but it may not have felt that it's something that might apply to fostering. But it's amazing how the Prophet ﷺ's advice, when you look at it, can be applied in so many different ways. There's a narration in Muslim which says that إِذَا مَاتَ ابْنُ آدَمَ, that when a person passes away, إِنْقَطَعَ عَمَلُهُ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ, his actions will end except for three. You've heard this hadith. صَدَقَةٌ جَارِيَةٌ, an ongoing charity, or عِلْمٌ يُنْتَفَعْ بِهِ, or knowledge that someone has benefited from, or وَلَدٌ صَالِحٌ يَدْعُو لَهُ, or a pious boy or child who does dua for that person. It's amazing how that hadith, in all three sections, can apply to fostering. That when you look after this child, you're protecting this child, you're safeguarding, you're being a turning point for that child, and inshallah, the progeny of that children, the positive impact of your intervention will have an impact on the progeny of that child, and it will be an ongoing sadaqah. Ilmun yuntafa' bihi, knowledge which someone benefit from. Your role as a foster carer is absolutely full of giving knowledge to this child, teaching them Islamic things and non-Islamic boundaries, and understanding how to manage life and skills. And this knowledge that they use for good in different ways is ilmun yuntafa bihi. And waladun salihun yad'u lahu, a pious child who does dua for them after they pass away, is again an application fostering whereby when you look after that child, when that child grows up, that child will see you in many ways as like a father. One of the slides I've got is of a girl who left a foster placement, and this girl was subject to child sexual exploitation, and she was in the wrong crowd. She would like to go partying, and she came to one of our foster placements. The foster carer really helped her with trying to understand boundaries. Foster carer really helped her on how to understand risk issues. There was a point when that girl still moved out, but ongoing, she wrote a letter, which is an interesting insight into how that girl thought of the parents. She said, I could just about read that, but I'm very sorry for the trouble I have caused, and I have realized everything that happens next is because of me. This girl really kind of moved out of placement, but she realized that now the foster parents have done the best that they can do. I've also realized that I have to screw my head on tight and focus on my future. This is things that when the child was there, she felt a bit like, oh, I don't need to know about this. But now she's going, a lot of the information that you give to this child, sometimes it doesn't hit home then, sometimes it hits home when they move on. I just wanted to say thank you and for all the
cooking.
All the cooking. Or taking me as a family. Even though that they used to call it brother one another. Never comes out, and when he talks to me, oh, it's a bit too informative. But one bit over here was most importantly, thank you, Dad, for being a dad towards me. It means the word as I have never had a dad. That's what she said to her foster carer. That thank you for the foster carer dad. Thank you for being a dad for me, because I've never had a dad. And part of what you're doing is something like this, to be in a position for someone who may have not had these people, and they, you could be in a position where you can turn that around for them. A quick concept is, how does fostering and adoption differ? Adoption is more of a long-term basis thing, and fostering is more or less a short-term thing where the parental rights do not transfer. We've mentioned some of this, why the children come into care. These are just some of the statistics why that around, when I said children come into care because of abuse, at the moment there are 57,000 children in UK at risk of abuse, and that number is going up in the last 5 years. So there's that many children that we know. 1 in 4 are rape victims under 16. So some of these children that are put into care have gone through a lot of trauma. And we think that maybe for every child that we know about, there's about 8 that we don't know. And the interesting point here, 1 to 2 children die every week in the UK as a result of abuse. So 1 to 2 children in UK die from this kind of abuse. The reason why the children are placed in foster care. So there is a role there. There's a role for, generally we have this idea that, it's not that bad. It's a very, very rare situation. But if we're thinking about this talk, I think the advert must have gone out maybe 2 weeks ago. If you bear that in mind, from then till now, 2 to 4 children have passed away because of abuse. And this, if you look at from that context, the need for fostering is quite heavy, because we need people who can be in a place who can understand these children, what they've gone through, and help them out, inshallah. General fostering role. I think what you can see from the list, fostering, it's not as simple as just have a child come into your house and you give him some food. They will be, your role generally will be trying to safeguard that child from whatever trauma they've gone in, try to safeguard them from a health and education perspective, making sure that as they develop, they not only are they physically thriving, but emotionally and they're thriving from that trauma as well. And you as a foster carer will also be taking part in a lot of the meetings and reviews, and you'll also be part of the future planning for this child. The role entails quite a bit of record keeping, emailing, traveling, transportation, and things like that. So it's quite a full-on role. And the basic things that we look for in fostering is the ability to care, have a spare room, be available, be able to take older children and younger sibling groups. Older children and younger sibling groups is a niche demand that foster caring is facing at the moment. But there are other providers that will, if you can only take younger children, or you're interested in caring for younger children, then maybe other providers, maybe like for example local authorities. I think got a brother here who's he's a foster carer for Tower Hamlets, and he looks after younger children. So that there is always a place for you in a different providers where you can inshallah help. And we look for the fact that if you've got financial stability and ability to sufficiently communicate in English, obviously, because there's quite a lot of record keeping and there's a lot of information sharing, and we sometimes we need people to be let people know really quick if there's any kind of deterioration in a placement. What could you do? First things first, please do dua for these children in need, and do dua for any kind of systems that are placed for these children that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept and take khair and take goodness from them. If you think you can foster, then please do get in touch with Foster Care Link, and whatever information that you have heard today, or you feel that you see someone that you think actually that person could become a foster carer, then please do share that information. Try to get in touch with Foster Care Link, put Islamic fostering in Google, and inshallah we're one of the top ones, and inshallah we could try to direct you in the correct direction. That's it really. Any questions, anyone? I'm kind of shocked through this. Any questions around fostering or the role or the children that come into care?
Is there an age limit on who can foster?
MashaAllah, that's a good question. Fostering, minimum age is 21. The highest age, there isn't any highest age. As long as you are healthy enough and able enough, then you can become a foster carer. So once you do 21, and if you feel you've got the skills to become a foster carer, then bismillah, you can.
Is it one room per child that you need?
Any foster children need to have their own room.
Okay.
Sibling foster children can share a room. So if they two boys or two girls, they can share rooms. If they're very young and there's a boy and a girl, then the local authority would allow a child to share a room. They wouldn't allow the foster carer's own children and the foster child to share a room.
So there's always the Muslim children, yeah?
Yeah.
Always Muslims.
Right. With Foster Care Link, we specialize in Muslim children for Muslim carers. You can choose, when you become foster carer, you can choose if you want to look after Muslim children or if you want to look after non-Muslim children as well. With other providers, then it would be generic. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. Sometimes there's a concept where the child might not feel matched if they're not from a Muslim background, but there are also advantages sometimes. Sometimes a non-Muslim child might be in need of help, and you might think, actually, you know what, I think I can help this person. That child might come, and they might grow up in a Muslim household, and if anything, at least they'll know when they grow up that I was cared by a Muslim family. I know what Muslims are like. Inshallah, that will be a stop from them thinking bad of Muslims. Inshallah, Allah opens doors for everyone. But Foster Care Link is a specialist Muslim agency. Yeah.
What's the average amount of time a child stays in the family?
There could be a foster placement could be short term, like a respite placement. So it could just be a few days. That's very short. And it could even be a few years. It could be technically fostering goes up to 18, the top age. we've got a very high shortage of carers, full stop. Then Muslim carers is an even more high shortage. Then within Muslim carers is an even more high shortage of carers who can take teenage children. Because there is a need there. These children, if they're not put in Muslim homes, they're put somewhere. They're put in a home. And they'll stay there till 18. If it's a non-Muslim home, it's a non-Muslim home. Which, the people who become foster carers, they become foster carers with good intentions. But with all the best intention in the world, if you can't cater for the religious, cultural identity of that child, then that is one part that will not be transferred as effective as a Muslim foster carer. So, the examples I gave you, like that girl who was subject to child sexual exploitation. We have some kids who are subject to radicalization, where the family tries to go to Syria or somewhere and they were intercepted, the children are put into foster care. There may be girls who are in care because of forced marriage issues. Now, children like that are going to be in trauma and they're going to go into a foster placement. If they're in a Muslim foster placement, the Muslim carer will be able to give a very balanced view of your cultural identity, your UK rights and the UK identity, and how to fuse them both. Whereas, if there's a carer who's not Muslim, they'll be able to give them that part, the UK bit, but they may not be able to understand that child's cultural, religious perspective. And I've had some of the girls that came to our foster placement, they're still in touch with the agency and the foster carers. And I remember them coming. They came to when they were really traumatized, and they came very, very traumatized at that time. Forced marriage issues. And I think there was one where there was a girl, she didn't want to get married to someone. She told the parents, the brother threatened her. She jumped out the window, went to the police, right? It all went crazy. She went into a foster placement. The family kind of realized they overreacted, right? But where it stood, the girl was very fragile at that point. And the Muslim foster carer was able to explain all the different dynamics, help her understand. The thing with her was, the family were persistent, she needs to get married to a certain type of kind of lineage. I think she was a Sayyid or something like that, right? And then the family was saying, you need to only get married into Sayyid family, right? And the foster carer was able to explain the Islamic, the cultural interpretation and the religious interpretation of what it really is. And alhamdulillah, now she's married, and she's got like 3 kids, and she comes to our annual events, and mashallah, she's really settled. But at that time, you can imagine if she went to a non-Muslim placement, what might have been the kind of turning point for her at that point. It could have been Allah's written everything, but it could have been very different.
So we know the situation here in England,
Yeah.
for these young children.
Yeah.
And we are considering fostering as a vulnerable children.
Oh, mashallah.
Maybe they are not vulnerable.
Yeah.
Their parents are vulnerable because of their activities.
Yeah. Is that,
So when you put them in fostering,
yeah.
it's a problem for the
Yeah.
foster.
That's a very, look, that is a real question.
Trauma, instead of the child.
Sometimes the child is the traumatizing element to the family dynamic. It's so true, that is really true. There's a few things over here to understand. Every child grows up, right? And they are, in a sense, a product of their experiences and the product of the messages that they've absorbed and how they feel, they see their life, right? Depending on how emotionally stable they are, they're going to react in those ways. Sometimes this is because purely environmental influences. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's something more deeper than that, or more psychological, more intrinsic. When a child comes, when their child is if they are chosen to come to a foster placement, if their needs are very complex, then they won't go to a foster placement. They'll go to a residential unit. Only when it's very, very complex. But ideally, they'll try to put them into a foster placement. When they are put into a foster placement, there's mechanisms in place. They do risk assessments, they do mental health assessments, they do emotional strength and challenges assessments. What that does is gives practitioners an idea that where is all these problems coming from, what's going on here. And you as a foster carer will be matched with the child. So there will be something, every person has a different skill. Not every foster carer is the same. Some carer will be very good for one thing, some carer will be very good for another thing. So based on that, you will be matched. So for example, if there is a boy who's involved in gangs, right? Parents are trying to explain to him, boy doesn't listen. Boys, there's a fight going on at home, right? And now they're in foster care. There may be a foster carer who's very good with teenage boys, very good with activities, very good with, different ways to focus the energy, like martial arts or other sports or things like that. That person will be very good for this young person, but it might not be the same as another carer who's got very young children and they're very good with earlier activities and things like that. So that's where we would match. Once the match is there, then we would try to support that carer, we try to support that child. Not every placement, we know that as well, not every placement will be a fairy story. It's not going to be like that coming and it's like, this the only one who's missing in this jigsaw and that's it, this child is forever now, happily ever after. It's not like that, it's not all of that. Sometimes, alhamdulillah, they settle really well, sometimes it doesn't. But how much we can, we do try to match. Different local authorities have different perspectives on this. With foster care link, for sure, when you're matching, if you say, I'm not comfortable with this, we won't take it further. Because we know that a child is coming into your house, right? So you need to be confident that this is someone you can help. But that being said, fostering is not an easy task. Fostering is a challenging task, although it's a rewarding task. It's not easy, but inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards for that level of commitment as well. But it's a balance between not just giving you anyone and completely leaving it, and just, it's a perfect child. If it was a perfect child, it probably wouldn't be foster care. But there are some situations where the child has having problems. Sometimes children are in care because their parents are in hospital or they've been displaced from another country, Syria, Afghanistan. There could be issues like that displaces the child as well. But yeah, a lot of times there could be UK children or children from other countries that are completely traumatized and they are very hard to settle. And it takes time. And a lot of times children do settle. When they've got a Sharir child, a Mastikor child, there's a lot that goes behind that label. There's a lot. And part of your training and part of your supervision will be around understanding that story, that narrative, and slowly breaking that down to a point where the child can now look at life in a different way. I hope that answers the question. Any other fostering related questions or anything to do with children in need?
If somebody's working like long hours, let's say for example, are they still eligible to foster or?
That's a good question. Space and availability. Availability is essential for fostering.
Yeah.
So if you're married, right, then you need, at least someone needs to be at home. If you're not, then someone needs to be available for that child. Primarily because many times when a children or foster placement starts in the beginning, school and everything isn't in place, or school might be there but they can't go to school, right? The other thing is that during the day there's usually a lot of other things that need to happen as well. So once the child is very stable, if they haven't got any emotion, they'll just go to school and they'll come back again. But a lot of times it's not the case. Sometimes there may be appointments during the day with social workers. There may be other appointments that the child needs to go to, and for that the foster carer needs to be available. And the other thing to bear in mind with fostering is that you need physical capacity, you also need emotional capacity. So if you're both working full time, both partners, and you're fostering, your emotional capacity is going to be very minimal, and that might not be enough to buffer the trauma that child is going through and absorb it and help them slow down. Whereas if one person is available at home at any given time, then the workload in addition to fostering is shared, so both of you are energized enough to help that child. So that's why they say at least one person should be at home at any given time. Once the placement is stable, long term, going to school, no issues, then maybe a foster carer can start working at that time, as long as they can flexibly accommodate meetings and stuff. Yeah? Any other questions? Sure. But I know the fostering is, I know a lot of people like to foster, they want to foster. We get loads of phone calls with people, and the reality of the situation is out of 100 people who apply, about 4 people get through to become foster carers. So it is a very niche role, and it's important that if you do know someone who can be a foster carer, that you try to spread that knowledge. I'm hoping on the receiver, the sisters listening, who there might be some people who might be interested in fostering, because the role itself entails it's a very important role. It entails a lot of caring, it entails a lot of record keeping, and it entails a lot of working with other people to make sure that the needs of that child are met. And it's not easy, but I'm telling you, you can ask a brother who's a foster carer, inshallah. When you get results, you get results. You see that child coming to your house and they were in need. They had health problems. They sometimes their children who come and they don't have a high life expectancy, things like that, and they come and they stay and they thrive. And you remember how they came, and you remember how they go or how they are at your home. It makes sense at that point why you did what you did. And I always like to say that sometimes don't think of it as you're helping a child always. Sometimes you don't know that amal, that action might be something that helps you in akhirat. Everything is written. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there to help everyone. But how do we know? It might be that we're thinking that we're helping this vulnerable child, but really that is a blessing that's come to our doorstep. That caused us to care more. It caused us to do more effort behind this child. It caused us to, go strive more. But that takes us to a place further than what we may have not done with just pure ibadah. So it's something to kind of think about. If that's it, Jazakallah khair.
Can I give my experience with brothers?
That might be a good idea, Sheikh.
I don't need this. I think I'll just.
There might be sisters listening, but someone might, inshallah.
So as Molana explained to you, I'm foster carer for one of the Islamic local authorities, Tawhandis, and I've been fostering for just over 7 years. It happened accidentally in the sense that my wife, she was a childminder, and while she was childminding, one of our distant friend used to drop a baby at our place when she used to go for training for fostering, and we didn't know what fostering was. Then my wife happened to ask her that, where did you get this little baby from? And she explained what fostering was, and we thought that let's give it a try. And alhamdulillah, we tried it. Looking back 7 years, I think that accident should have happened 17 years ago. Because what fostering enables you to do for a child, and what the reward factor, brother said, we cannot imagine, we can only experience it. Right? And few of the things what brother said, in 7 years, I've had 10 children, we looked after 10 children. Although they've all been young, when I say young, from 4 weeks old till I've got a girl who's 7 years old. Out of the 10, 4 of them were like respite, they only came for 3 weeks. And out of the 10, 6 of them were Muslim, and 4 of them were non-Muslim. One respite we had for 3 weeks, they were non-Muslim, but they didn't have any religion in a sense, although the background was Afro-Caribbean, but background might have been a Christianity, but they didn't follow any religion. They were with us for only 3 weeks for respite, because other foster care was going for holiday, and due to the documentation, all the thing, they could not take them with them. I've got 2 siblings, 2 girls, a 3-year and a 7-year-old now with me. They're white English Christian girls. It was very difficult initially to think about having a non-Muslim coming into your house, But as the brother said, we're looking after Muslim children, or a Muslim children going to a non-Muslim house. Although there's very strict rules that when these children are with you, You cannot influence your culture or your religion onto them. Right? But you got to help them to follow their own culture and own religion. You got to help them. Now these two girls are with us. The younger one is young to understand, but the older one, because she's of school age, she picked things up very quickly. We don't teach anything, but as soon as we walk in the house to make salam, she's learned how to make salam. Right? My grandson, he's living with me, who's 8 years old. He listens to the Arabic nasheed, and this little girl, while sitting in a car, she will sing Talawul Durayna right through the whole song. You know, this is what they've captured in the environment. Now imagine a Muslim child going to a non-Muslim house. Although the non-Muslim foster carer would not try and influence a child to become a non-Muslim, but they will pick up things over there. Yeah. So that's why it is very, very important, brothers, that we can get as many as possible Muslim foster carers, so we can have Muslim children. I mean, there was one case we were discussing in our meeting, and there was one boy. He went to a non-Muslim house, and alhamdulillah, he came from a good family where they used to practice religion and they used to read namaz and all the things. Now they had a family dog where they went to, and the foster carer could not understand that every time this boy, he wanted to say his prayers, he would change his clothes. They thought maybe he's got a OCD problem. Yeah? Compulsive disorder, yeah. He wants to clean everything up. Then, after a while, they realized that no, that's not a problem, because the dog used to brush past him, and this boy used to feel that his clothes have gone napal, so he used to change it every time he used to read namaz. So things like this, it's very, very important. At the moment, there's a shortage of 9,000 foster carers in UK. Right? Brother gave statistics over there that it's 57,000. It's gone up to 63,000 children who needs a foster home. So it is very, very important, brothers. I mean, the very first child we had, he was 4 weeks old. He came from hospital, and he left our placement when he was 3 years and 10 months old. Right? So he was basically our baby. He grew up with us. The thing was, he came with a lot of health issues, and when he came, nobody gave him a chance. You know, even the doctors, they said that the chances of survivals are very less, because he had a heart problem, he had a lot of other issues. But alhamdulillah, through the help of Allah, we managed to keep all his appointments, advocate for him, go and see as many consultants as possible. Slowly by slowly, now that boy is thriving, he's 8 years old, mashallah, and you saw him, he's going to normal school, he's studying, he's doing well. You know, these are the rewards that you get of doing fostering. So alhamdulillah, brothers, alhamdulillah, Mawlana Abdul Rahman very well. They're running a fantastic fostering care. Yeah. Brothers who've got space, yeah, and who can spare time, please think about it. You know, if you haven't got space, you think you can't. But if you know somebody, please do tell them. It's a very, very, very important job which needs to be done. So it's a request to all the brothers. That's right.